Hello and welcome to our first custom-made video lecture of the semester. Today we're going to talk about developing a consumer personae. As you can see, the purpose of the lecture is to explain the concept to you and to help you create personae, in our case 5, for your client project. For this project, as I said, we're going to create 5 people or entities, could be an organization, that we would consider to be possible customers for Katie and Michael. So I start by asking you this question: could a current or prospective customer write their own consumer persona? And that is, if you considered yourself to be a possible future leader in this program, how would you describe yourself in a way that is generalizable to other people like you, and yet specific enough that that marketing action can be taken, that a product offering could be developed that would appeal to you and satisfy your needs? Well, that really summarizes why we're doing this. From the marketing perspective, we want to better understand what motivates the customer, not just for this project, but in understanding consumer persona in general. We want that understanding as marketers. We also want our clients and managers to be able to understand who they're serving, and then to uncover what quantitative research might not be able to capture. This really is qualitative research, not using numbers as much as using stories and using ideas. Here are a couple of important definitions for you to take a look at. We will talk more about target marketing, as described in the first definition, a little bit later on in this semester. But in a nutshell, groups of customers can be divided into segments. And of those segments, some will be targeted by a marketer as prospective customers, while others may not be targeted. If you remember, a little while ago I talked about MTV and how they targeted teenage boys as their selected segment, their target market. Of course, that means other people are still welcome to use the product. It's just that the targeted segment, that's where the marketer is going to devote their marketing communication and resources. So what is a consumer persona? Well, as you can see from this list here, they're not just figments of the imagination. Well, they're created, but they also represent real people that have real marketing problems that our client can help solve. It's not simply a profile, it's not simply a description of the customer's attributes, but more along the lines of who they are and how they can benefit from the product offering. If you want to talk about a consumer profile, take a look at this. This is a great tool. We're actually not going to use it right now. We'll talk about it more later in the semester. But it's a tool that's available. Actually, when you have some time, you can go ahead and play with it. Nielsen and their My Best Segments tool allows you to type in a zip code. I typed in 60305 for this example. And you can tell from the research what segments live within that zip code. And if you're familiar with the Oak Park River Forest area, this might not surprise you too much. Again, when you have a chance, go ahead and check out this site for yourself. Type in 60305 or your zip code, whatever you choose, and learn more about the profiles of the people who live in that neighborhood. Now we're getting closer to consumer personae, but we take it a step further. In order to develop the consumer personae for our client and in general, what you want to start out with are 3 broad categories of customers. Category 1, people that have a need for the product or service that's being marketed. Number 2, people that can afford to purchase and use the product or service. Now in our case, money isn't really the tool we're talking about here. When you're talking about students and a product or service that's free to use, what are we talking about? Think about that for a few minutes. We'll come back to it. The third category is people that are interested in learning about these kinds of products or services. So now we have three criteria. People that know I kept myself. People that need the product or service, people that can afford the product or service, and people that are interested in the product or service. Now I almost caught myself in a mistake there. Looking at number one, people that need the product or service don't necessarily know that they need it. That kind of comes into category number 3 there. When we put these three qualifications together, we get my favorite geometric shape, as you remember, the Venn diagram. This is not the Venn diagram of creating your value proposition. We've looked at that before. Instead, this Venn diagram takes those three categories that we saw in the previous slide. People that need our offering, people that can afford our offering, and people that are interested in their offering. And when you lay those three categories out in a Venn diagram, what you'll find is you get some overlaps. This is how we determine who our primary and secondary optimal target segments are. If we see two overlaps, like people that need our product or service and people that are interested in our product or service, leaving out whether or not they can afford it, well, that's part of the secondary audience. Again, all three of the two-part combinations, those are the secondary audience. When all three overlap, when you have somebody that wants our service, that needs our service, and that can afford our service, that is our primary optimal target audience. I'll share an example or two with you along the way here. Now, a couple of things to note. Look at the arrow here. What are, again, the resources other than money that we're talking about with students trying to attract them to a student activity? Something to think about. My guess is that you said time. Time is a very rare commodity. Another resource might be friends or community. Is this something that that will put them in better stead with their pals? So a word about when you have a secondary target audience. Again, take the people that need our offering, people that are interested in our offering, but maybe can't afford it. That is, they don't have time to participate, using the time example of a resource. One thing the marketer would be challenged to do is help them find time. Just as if we were talking about money, one of the challenges might be to help the customer find money, help the customer finance the offering. So what that should indicate to you why somebody that has just a combination of two as opposed to a combination of all three is in the secondary audience is because it simply takes more resources to make the match between what we offer and what the customer wants, compared to if all three of the circles overlap. Okay, that Venn diagram was the first part of this assignment, and you are going to be creating those yourself with your team. The second step is related to that, and that's digging deeper within a consumer persona. That is, envision, like it says, a general persona as a target filled with concentric rings. In this case, what we're going to do is look at one member of that optimal target audience. And instead of laying out three different circles, what we're going to do is build circles within circles. And each inner circle will be more specific about the kind of customer we're talking about. So for example, what we saw earlier was called a Venn diagram. This is called a stacked Venn diagram that starts with the biggest circle of a general description of a prospective customer. Then we go to another circle inside, which is a little more specific and therefore more actionable. That kind of knowledge helps the marketer tailor the offering better to suit the customer's needs. The next circle inside is even more specific. The next circle even more specific than that. Give you a quick example. What if we wanted to market something to Dominican University students, which as a matter of fact we do? We can start with the biggest circle, a Dominican University student. The next circle, let's say it's a female student. We could have also said, well, what else could we have said? Could have said an undergraduate versus a grad student. Could have given an age range. Could have given an ethnicity or religious background or income level. We could have done a lot of things to narrow it down. In fact, that's going to be part of your challenge before too long. But here we said a female student who's taking marketing 250. So what we've done in a sense is narrow that number of students down from well more than 1,000 to how many female Dominican University students are taking marketing 250. And you have a special message that you want to send to them in terms of your marketing. Well, this is just a quick and dirty example, but what you hope is that each succeeding inner circle tells the marketer more and more about their customer. All right, so here's a more detailed example. Suppose a company is selling online security tools designed to protect user privacy. They consider 5 buyer personas. As a side note, I'm interchanging personas with personae, ending in an AE. Both are plural of persona. So in this case, they came up with 5 possible customers. At this point, we don't have diagrams drawn out for them. We don't know which ones are optimal or secondary. And in fact, here's the part where you get to be creative without any constraints. Think about our product, or our service actually, that we're offering. Just start thinking about what kinds of people might be customers for Katie and Michael. So back to the example, selling online security tools, they came up with 5 different kinds of possible customers. Top executives of companies, beginning internet users, high school or college-aged users, young professionals, and middle-aged to senior citizens. And for each of those, they came up with a kind of a code name: CEO, new, student, yuppie, and older, respectively. Let's now translate the list we just took a look at into the Venn diagram that we've been working with. And again, at the top we've got personae with a need for what the product or service can satisfy. On the lower right, people that are interested, want to know more about it. And in the bottom left, people that can afford the security software. And again, afford may mean money, as indicated on this slide, but it could also indicate time. It could also indicate, in our case, the capability of understanding it or of putting it onto their system. So starting with this Venn diagram, we've taken those 5 segments and we match them to whether we can consider them to be secondary or optimal targeted segments. And in this case, the new customer, just for the sake of argument, we indicated that they need this security protection, but maybe they don't realize that they do, and they can't afford it. So they are what we might even call a tertiary, a third level targeted customer. We have a couple examples of secondary customers. An older customer has the need and they can afford it. They just may not realize that they do. A student knows they need it and wants to get the product but can't afford it. A CEO might be interested in knowing about it and be able to afford it, but they actually might not need that kind of security just based on their resources. But for the sake of argument, we decided that someone we classified as a yuppie would meet all 3 of the criteria, and they therefore would be part of our optimal target market. With that in mind, let's now move over to the stacked Venn diagram. We're going to focus on the yuppie, the young professional, and dig deeper. Not just anybody who qualifies under this description of being a yuppie, but somebody who's working in the service industry, to narrow that down, someone who feels that they've got to be connected 24/7, and then what else? How else could we continue to hone in on this particular customer? Now, kind of a general rule of thumb is information is wonderful. You want to know as much about your customer as you can, but that information comes at a cost. That cost might be time, it could be money, it could be a delay in rolling out a product while you're still trying to gain more information. So at some point, you have to decide that with this amount of information we can move forward. To continue to know more about the customer would not be economically feasible or justifiable. All right, we've looked at Venn diagrams, we've looked at the stacked Venn diagram. We are going to dig even deeper now and bring in a new example. Now we're going to talk about a local running club that seeks new members. Here's where we get to be a little bit creative. You're going to describe this customer. Give the customer a name. Give the customer a personality. And give the customer problems and issues that they need our offering to help them solve. Take a moment and read about Marissa. Would Marissa be interested in a new running club? Sounds like she might be, but you can also see that she's got certain issues that are important to her, certain restrictions, certain constraints, and the running club would be well advised to position their offering as a solution to her difficulty, something that would make her life easier. So that's Marissa. And again, if we were to go ahead and lay out the Venn diagram, does she need our product? Does she want to know more about our product? Can she afford our product? She might very well be an optimal targeted customer. Not just Marissa, but people like Marissa. They may not be exactly like her, but we can still start to generalize. Now we're sort of going to work from the inside back out. So that's Marissa. Here's James. Take a look at James's story. And ask yourself now, is James an optimal targeted customer? As you can see, he's got some athletic background. He wants to get back into shape, so it sounds like he wants our product, and it sounds like he needs our product. One question we might ponder is, can he afford our product? If we're talking about money, the answer is probably yes. If we're talking about time, the answer is probably yes. If we're talking about his heart condition, a running club may not be for him. That's something we'd have to keep in mind unless there is an aspect of the running club that would look after him and his heart condition. So in this case, James might be a secondary targeted customer as opposed to Marissa. Here's a third example customer, and this one might catch you by surprise, but it's not a person at all. It's local employers. Take a moment to read this description. Do you think local employers, as a larger group, we actually could name an employer if we wanted to be specific at the level that we took with Marissa and James, but local employers, I would say, need this offering. They can certainly afford this offering, but do they want to know more about this offering? This is a case where through marketing communications, we might actually create kind of a brand awareness or a product awareness to let some businesses know that if you want to have happier and healthier employees, let's work together. Either encourage them to join our running club, or let's find a way where maybe you can sponsor some of our events or have some other kind of interaction. So this might be an example of somebody needing the product but not realizing that they do or how much it could help them. Question to you is, as we're considering our work for Katie and Michael, are there any non-individual customers that they should be thinking about? Any partnerships, any affiliations that might be useful to them? Okay, now here's how it all comes together. This is your assignment. It's worth 5 points. That's included on the syllabus under the other assignments to be announced category. But even more important, because 5 points isn't a lot, this is part of your final project. And the work you put into this workshop, some of it will be in class and most of it will be outside of class, but the work you put into this goes right into your final project with maybe some tailoring as the project continues. But what you need to create is a Venn diagram like you see on the left-hand side of this screen that displays your primary and secondary consumer personae. I want a minimum of 5, and at least one of them should be optimal, meaning they fall within all three overlaps of the circle. It'd be better if you could figure out more than one optimal, but whatever isn't optimal should come under the category of secondary, and that is they come under the double overlap as opposed to the triple overlap. So to develop and display a total of 5 primary and secondary consumer personae. The next step is to create a stacked Venn diagram for each one of those 5. Give them a name. Talk about what they're doing here at Dominican University. Talk about what benefit they could get from this leadership program. Think carefully. If some of it becomes biographical or autobiographical based on people you know or people who are you, that's how it works. Take advantage of that. So finally then, a written description of each of these personae. So that's the assignment. The Venn diagram, the stacked Venn diagram, and the written description. This should be submitted to me via Canvas by midnight on Friday, February 21st. We'll have a little time to talk about it on February 14th in class. Of course, any questions you have, I'd be glad to answer. And I think you'll have fun putting your ideas together and creating some consumer personae. Thanks a lot. We'll see you in the classroom.